Welcome into another PFF grade release show. Max Chadwick alongside Dalton Wasserman going over the biggest results from another insane Week 10 of college football. Dalton, we got back at about midnight last night. We went to the Penn State-Ohio State game, which would be the first game we're talking about today. It was a 6-hour trip front there and back. It was a very, very fun time until the final score was revealed. But it was a very fun time, man. But it was a really long road trip that we had, and we were listening to all the games in the car, and then we had to watch all the tape when we got back.
Look, I had a fun time regardless. I don't really have a horse in that race, so it was just a fun football game for me between two really good teams. And I'll tell you what, it was another wild Saturday. I believe it was 7 ranked teams that lost this week. I mean, it feels like there's parts of this playoff race that are getting a little bit clearer, and there are parts that are getting a lot murkier every single week. So it's going to be a wild November, and we started it off with a week like that. It's only getting crazier as we go.
Absolutely. So let's get into the first game that we're going to talk about today. That is number 4 Ohio State once again for I think the 8th time in a row beating number 3 Penn State 20-13. Let's go over the highest graded players, starting off with the winning Ohio State Buckeyes. The highest graded player for them was cornerback Davison Igbinison at a 90.6 grade. At number 2 was running back Travion Henderson at 77.7. Number 3 is defensive tackle Ty Hamilton at 76.6. Number 4, safety Lathan Ransom, 75.3. The other safety at number 5 and Caleb Downs at a 72.7. And quarterback Will Howard with a 71.8 grade. Let's go over to Penn State side with their highest graded players in the loss for them. Number 1 is safety Zakee Wheatley at 78.6. Number 2 is Tyler Warren, the tight end, at 70.2. Number 3, edge defender Abdul Carter at a 70.2. Number 4, cornerback A.J. Harris at a 70. Number 5, linebacker Tony Rojas at a 69.8. And Drew Aller finished with a 63.7 grade in the loss. Dawn, for you, what was the stat that told the story in this loss for the Nittany Lions?
So I think this was the game that finally bit Penn State as far as not having enough elite weapons. We know Tyler Warren's one of, the 2 or 3 best tight ends in the country, but at wide receiver, they were obviously short last year. They kind of tried to find some guys who could get the job done this year. Harrison Wallace has had a decent year. They tried to bring in Julian Fleming. That hasn't really worked. Liam Clifford playing in the slot. But their wide receivers in this game had 3 catches for 49 yards, and 45 of those 49 were Harrison Wallace, one of which late in the second quarter was just an incredible catch and really tight coverage. I mean, it was to me a matter of they don't have the weapons on the outside to separate from a secondary like Ohio State's. And it's a problem when you think about if you take away Tyler Warren, which for the most part Ohio State did. He made a couple plays later in the game. They just don't have the perimeter guys to do it. I think there's 2 things they're lacking right now is just an elite wide receiver. Because when you're talking about you're going up against an Ohio State secondary with Denzel Burke, Igbinosun, Caleb Downs, Lathan Ransom, all those guys that get mentioned every single week, one of the best secondaries, maybe the best secondary in the country right now. They just don't have guys who can get open. I think there was probably 2 plays the entire day where I saw someone really separate. Harrison Wallace on an in-cut, and then there was a curl route off to the left that actually ended up being incomplete after review. They just couldn't get anybody open. So I'm not about right now any Drew Aller slander coming out, because I'm not sure what he was supposed to do in this game with as tight a coverage. And even a couple of the 2 best the 2 best plays that they made in the passing game were wicked contested catches, again by Wallace and another one by Tyler Warren later. Aller completed just 3 of 9 balls over 10 air yards and only 1 attempt over the middle over 10 air yards, okay? And that's the big thing in this Penn State offense is they want to get up the seams of the defense. Ohio State wasn't allowing it. They made them beat them on the outside and after the catch, and Penn State just doesn't have the guys outside to be able to do that.
They really don't, and that's why I was worried about going into the game as a Penn State fan, and it came true, honestly, because like you said, they just do not have the horses on the receiving core. And I know so many Penn State fans are telling me, losing Keandre Lambert-Smith and losing Dante Cephas are top 2 wide receivers from last year who also struggled last year. This was an issue last year, too. They didn't fix it. It's the same thing that you saw last year. They brought in Julian Fleming, the Ohio State cast-off, who hasn't really done anything for them this year. They just didn't fix this problem, and you're seeing this show up now. I mean, they're lucky Tyler Warren's an elite tight end, because if he wasn't, this passing game would have nothing to rely on right now. So, yeah, it was a really, really rough showing for Penn State's receivers. My set that tells the story is, again, on Penn State's offense. Penn State had 2 trips inside the 5-yard line and scored 0 points on those 2 trips. So the first one, right before halftime, they had a 1st and goal on the 3-yard line with 24 seconds left before halftime, and Drew Aller threw a pick in the end zone. They could have ran the ball. Penn State had, I think, 2 timeouts left at that point. You had the ball on the 3-yard line with first and goal. Katron Allen's a guy that you can trust theoretically on the goal line. I'll talk about that in just a second, but it's a guy you can trust theoretically on the goal line to get you 3 yards. And they couldn't punch it in, honestly. But then, I thought that, Dawn, after that, but then maybe I was proven wrong later on in the game because they had a first and goal again on the 3-yard line with under 7 minutes left trying to tie the game. They ran 3 straight times with Katron Allen on the 3-yard line. He got to the 2, then he got to the 1, and then he got stuffed. So 3 straight times they got stuffed on the 1. And then on 4th and goal from the 1, instead of trying to run the ball, I thought maybe, they're so close that Aller at 6'5" could have maybe done a QB sneak and got in. Tyler Warren, your best player, put it in his hands. They've done a lot of Wildcat with him. Maybe let him be the Wildcat quarterback and let him punch it in. Instead, what they try to do is throw it to, I believe, the backup tight end, Khalil Dinkins, not even Tyler Warren. Threw it to the backup tight end, incomplete pass on 4th and goal. They had 4 chances to get 3 yards, and they could not punch it in, honestly. So that's at least 10 points left on the field in what ended up being a 7-point game. Penn State, just the fact that they only had 2 trips inside the 5-yard line and did not score either time, even a field goal either time, that is not acceptable, honestly, for Penn State's offense.
Yeah, and I you know me, I'm a huge fan of Andy Kotelnicki. I thought for a lot of this game he called a good game, but it was more the interception on that first trip that you mentioned. I think if you're going to throw the ball, fine, but I'm just not. The goal line fade does not work like people think it does, and especially when you're talking about, okay, of all the guys you would want to be doing that, I get Harrison Wallace just made a great catch, but it's the goal line
Give
fade.
Tyler Warren a shot.
Fade to Harrison Wallace is not going to be the best player in their playbook. And then the second time, honestly, I know a lot of people are getting on the 4th down call. I'm not killing it as much. I'm more in the boat where I'm like, look, find a way to get it in the first 3 downs. I mean, even you mentioned it could be Warren, it could be some other sort of, but you could even put Bo Prabula in the game just as just for the option threat down there on the goal line. But it just, I mean, that's the one time, it might be the only time this year where I've really seen Andy Kotelnicki kind of botched the play calls a little bit. I still think overall he called a pretty good game. He had to get deep in the bag to get yardage in parts of this game. Again, in part because their receivers couldn't separate, right? And it just feels like in big moments they don't have a ton of options. It can be such a grind for them on offense if he's not creating the big plays with the play calls. And it's hard against a team as talented as Ohio State to only create explosive plays with play calls, right? Eventually you have to be able to win one-on-one. We saw it when they played Oregon, right? We saw Evan Stewart beat them. Tej Johnson beat them. Dylan Gabriel. It's just Penn State, they've taken what is a decently talented offense, right? And it's been leveled up with the play calling being better than what it was last year. But it gets against a team like this, you mentioned, you have to have horses. And I just don't think they don't have enough horses on the outside. And I think, honestly, they don't have a whole lot of team speed. On offense. Really, I just don't think they have any sort of burner that makes you respect them deep.
No, absolutely. I mean, you saw in the Oregon game, Oregon was able to win deep on the perimeter with them, and they could not do it because they don't have the guys, honestly. Now, again, I don't blame Andy Kotelnicki. There's a couple play calls I didn't love. I don't really blame Aller for either. I just blame they have nothing at receiver. Nothing at receiver. And that's what's really killing Penn State in this game, especially against a great secondary like that. Dawn, what to you was the most impressive part about the Ohio State victory, though?
I think the one question from their defense last season was what they had going on at safety. There's no question about that this year. You bring in Caleb Downs, who's arguably the best safety in the country from Alabama, and you move Lathan Ransom back there in a more full-time safety role. These two guys, we've talked about them a lot this year. They've been spectacular. This game, look, do the stats jump out? Did either one of them have an interception or anything like that? No, but they did such a great job controlling the game, staying disciplined, making tackles. Downs with a 72.7 overall. Lathan Ransom with a 75.2 overall. He combined for 13 tackles. The only big play they allowed was the Tyler Warren play that set up that second red zone trip that got him down in there. I mean, you're really looking at maybe the best pair of safeties in the country right now, and you're getting into this now, the way that Jim Knowles used them yesterday was really the key to their defensive success in that game, getting Penn State uncomfortable and getting them out of what they normally do to succeed on offense.
Absolutely. Yeah. Jim Knowles, to me, was the most impressive part, the Ohio State defensive coordinator. So Penn State averaged negative .579 EPA per pass. That is really bad, obviously. And Dawn, I forgot who tweeted this out, and I want to give credit to them, but someone tweeted a great stat. So the last 2 times that an Andy Kotelnicki coached offense did not score a touchdown in a game was obviously this game against Jim Knowles and that Ohio State defense. Because remember, the only touchdown Penn State scored was a pick 6. The offense only scored 6 points on 2 field goals from Penn State's offense. The other time was in 2021 when Andy Kotelnicki was the Kansas offensive coordinator and Jim Knowles was the Oklahoma State defensive coordinator. So the last 2 times that Andy Kotelnicki did not score a touchdown for one of his offenses, it was against Jim Knowles, who I think has time and time again shown that he is one of the best defensive coordinators in the country. And to me, Dawn, I was so impressed by the game plan in this game. He knew, do not let 44 beat you. Penn State in the press box had a flyer that they gave out and said, hey, the best tight end in college football. We actually sat next to a representative from the John Mackey. We're actually the nephew of John Mackey, and we're talking to him and how impressed he was by Tyler Warren. They're like, okay, we're not going to show that Tyler Warren is the best tight end in college football in this game. And like you said, they played a lot of too high with those safeties. They took away the up the middle, and he dared Penn State, dared them to win on the sidelines. Go ahead. We'll give you one-on-one coverage. We'll give you man coverage on the sidelines. Go beat us. Go ahead, try it. They couldn't do it. No. And that was a great job by Jim Knowles, knowing exactly what this Penn State offense is. Other defenses did not really know that. Like USC got torched because Tyler Warren just was able to do whatever he wanted against them. He knew Tyler Warren would be the difference maker if they allowed him to, and they didn't. So that was a great job by him, and I was just really, really impressed by just the game plan overall. And only allowing 6 points from Penn State's offense, that's incredible stuff by Jim Knowles. So shout out to him, man. He did an excellent job in that game.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think one thing I'm curious to see later in the week when we get the coverage data in for this game is how much more too high he used than usual, because Ohio State's generally a very heavy cover 3 sort of team, but in this game you could feel it. Downs and Ransom, it was just each of them sitting on a hash mark and not moving until they knew where the ball was going. And just you take away the seams from this offense. We've talked about a signature of Penn State's offense being Drew Aller throwing balls up the seam. Weren't getting that. Couldn't even attempt it in this game with those 2 guys sitting there. So you're right, a great game plan put together by Jim Knowles. And another look, Ohio State, they're squeaking by. But there's no question this is an elite defense.
Oh, absolutely.
It's one of the 2 or 3 best defenses in the country, if not number 1. I mean, they're gonna keep riding this defense as far as they can.
Absolutely. So before we go to the next game, I'm just going to get on my soapbox as a lifelong Penn State fan real quick. James Franklin is not the problem. Do not fire James Franklin. This guy is not the problem right now, because right now you look at Penn State. This is a top 10 to top 15 program in college football. And what is Penn State, Dalton? They're a top 10 to top 15 team in college football. I've seen so many people. We were on the field, Dalton. They were throwing water bottles onto the field, chanting F James Franklin, F Franklin, fire Franklin. He obviously got in the spat with the fan after the game was over as well. He is not the problem here. And the coaching is not the problem here. You know what the problem is? They are significantly behind resource-wise with these top programs. The NIL, if you look at how much NIL Penn State has compared to a program like Ohio State, it is a massive difference. I mean, this is not a close gap between the two of them right now. And I think so many, we're talking about the car ride home, there's so many college football fans, Dawn, that look at college football like the NFL and think, oh, all jobs are created equal. If you don't win, obviously it's not created equal. There's some programs that have massively more resources than other programs, and Ohio State has a lot more resources than Penn State. The fact that even Penn State was close in this game compared with the resources they have is really impressive. Like, Penn State is significantly behind in NIL right now, and Ohio State is one of the best NILs in the country, and obviously getting Caleb Downs, getting Quinshon Judkins, getting all these guys. Penn State can't do that because they don't have the resources. So for Penn State fans that I'm sure are watching this right now and are upset with this, you want to close the gap to Ohio State, donate some money and make sure, or boost up that program or whatever you can do, because right now the difference between Penn State and Ohio State is resources. It's not coaching. The difference is resources, and that is why Penn State's behind right now.
And to take the optimist angle of this, in a year now where we have a 12-team playoff, they still have a very clear inside track to a playoff spot. Just win the rest of their games. They're going to be favored in the rest of their games. They just have to bounce back, and they can get to 11-1 and get there. And then you play one game at a time, and I think this is as open a national title year as we've seen in a long time, especially with the playoff the way it's going to be. So they just looked at, it's tough. It's tough to lose to Ohio State every year, but bounce back and execute.
Everyone loses to Ohio State every year.
Right. Just keep playing.
Yeah, it's so crazy to me that you're like, oh, it's like saying, oh, they lose to the Chiefs every year. Oh, you got to fire him. Like, come on. Like, what are we expecting here? Like, so I just hate that. I hate it so much. He's winning all the other games he should, honestly. If he starts losing the other ones, then we'll talk. But, I mean, right now, man, he's performing as well as he possibly can for what he's given right now. So I just want to say that. All right, next thing we're talking about is a big upset that we saw. Actually, maybe not a big upset, depending on who you talk about. It is South Carolina destroying Texas A&M, number 10 Texas A&M. 44-20. Let's go to the highest grade player, starting off with the South Carolina Gamecocks. Edge defender Dylan Stewart just continues to be an absolute star in his true freshman season with an 89.8 grade. We'll talk about him in just a second. TJ Sanders, another great player in that defensive line, 87.2. Rocket Sanders, the running back at 82. Joshua Simon, the tight end, 75.6. Cornerback O'Donnell Fortune was also one of the highest graded players in this game. We'll get the exact grade on that in just a second. And then Lenore Sellers with a 70.4 grade. Let's go over to Texas A&M with their highest graded players. Their highest one was Jabri Barber, their top receiver, with a 78.4. Armaj Reed Adams, offensive guard, has been playing really well for them all year, honestly, with a 74.5. Marcus Ratliff at a 72.7. Jaden Hill at a 71.5. Bryce Anderson, 71.1. And Marcel Reed, the quarterback, at a 51.2 grade. Dalton, for you, what was the stat to the story?
Fill in the gap there real quick, because I was doing the grades at 5:30 this morning and just whiffed it. O'Donnell Fortune with a 72.9, so obviously a very good day for him. Okay, so this was a game where, and I'm so mad that I knew there was an SEC upset coming and I picked the wrong one. I'm so mad about that. But this was a game where from the very first play of the game, you could just feel South Carolina's defensive line. This is one of the, 2 or 3 best D-lines in the country. You could some argue it's number one. It almost, if you're watching this game as an offensive coach, okay, you would get anxiety watching South Carolina's D-line just absolutely just shred it, right? Dylan Stewart, TJ Sanders. You still have Kyle Kennard. You still have Tonka Hemingway. You got everybody. There's so many guys. They just dominated this game from start to finish. As a unit, 47.2% pass rush win rate. They pressured Marcel Reed on half of his dropbacks, and Reed was trying, man. He was trying to stay in the pocket. He was trying to step up and make throws, but it's a nightmare right now playing this South Carolina defensive line. They can beat, when they play like they played last night, they could play with any team in the country. I'm talking at the very top, A&M, Oregon, Georgia, Bama, we've seen it already. Oh, yeah. LSU, it does not matter. This is one of the top 3 to 5 defenses in the entire country. Their D-line dominated start to finish. It's just, it is so, literally, I'm telling you, it's like you watch this, it's like anxiety-inducing. Like you're worried about the quarterback getting hurt. You're worried about all these different things. To A&M's offensive line, which had been playing really well of late, right, especially in the run game, no chance at all. That's just what it comes down to. And I'm just going to lean into my most impressive here. Dylan Stewart's a freak of nature.
Yeah.
This is nuts. A 90 pass rush grade last night. He had 9 pressures. He had a sack in the fourth quarter. I believe he recovered a fumble. He's got now, because there was a time he got off to a hot start, then kind of hit a lull as they got into SEC play. The last 2 weeks, he's got 14 pressures. Ooh. This is a freak of nature. We were talking about this last night. Right now, if we did our all-eligible mock right now, he'd be edge 1.
Yeah.
He's third, Max, he's third in the nation in pass rush grade right now as a true freshman. It's just
in the SEC.
The SEC, playing playing the Alabama and A&M and LSU. He's a freak of nature. This is a guy for 2027, right? We're talking about with him.
Yeah.
We're already looking at him like, oh, this is like an edge player who could be the number 1 overall pick.
Yeah.
That's how good Dylan Stewart is. And we talked about it earlier in the year. We kind of hit a low where he was figuring things out, still trying to get, and he was really good in run defense in this game too. Dylan Stewart, along with the rest of the South Carolina defensive line, to me, that they just dominated the entire game from start to finish. And A&M, and I know actually they tied the game. They took the 20-17 lead, and the game was tied at 20 at halftime. But if you fall behind, any team in the country could lose to South Carolina if they fall behind. If they fall behind that defense 14-0, good luck.
Yeah.
Because this D-line is just, it's off the charts. It's really, for as talented and deep as it is, it may be the best D-line in the whole country.
It is disgustingly good. Michigan's definitely up there as well, because Michigan is so good as well. But yeah, dude, and I cannot wait for that all-eligible mock draft, because we did our all-eligible mock draft last year. And if you want to check it out, go check it out, because this is a very fun episode that we did. And just for anyone who doesn't know what we're talking about when we say that, all-eligible mock draft, basically think of it like NBA style, where NBA, you only have to go to college for 1 year. That's what we're trying to do here. So if you go to college for 1 year, you're eligible to be drafted. So 2024, 2025, 2026, 2027 guys are eligible to be drafted. In that last year, a lot of the top picks were still 2024 guys, because it was loaded at the top. In this kind of draft, though, this year, I think you're going to see a lot of 2027 guys. Like obviously Dylan Stewart, Jeremiah Smith is up there, Ryan Williams is up there as well. A bunch of true freshmen like DJ Lagway, Dylan Raiola.
Jordan Seaton.
Yeah, Jordan Seaton. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's so many guys. So that all eligible mock draft that we're going to do during draft season, later on is going to be unbelievable. So I can't wait to do that. So I'm glad you did both on road dogs. Mine kind of go into each other as well. I kind of had a feeling going to this game, whoever runs the ball better is going to win this game, honestly. And Texas A&M had a lot of troubles running the football. Negative 0.3 EPA per rush in this one. Only 168 rushing yards total. They averaged 4.3 yards per carry, 0.6 yards before contact per carry. Really, the Le'Veon Moss injury early in the game killed them. I think he only had 2 carries the entire night.
They played 4 snaps. Got hit twice, was shaken up on the first one, and then really went down on the second one. That hurt him a lot because he's been so good this year, and it's really been that 3-headed monster in the backfield.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, you look at what the Texas A&M is right now. If you stop their ground game, you're going to have a lot of success against Texas A&M because Marcel Reed, as electric as he's been as a runner, he's still really raw as a passer. He had a 47.3 passing grade in this game. So that really was the set to tell story for me, was that just, hey, if you stop A&M's run game, they're going to struggle to score, honestly. And you saw that in this one. And then on the opposite side, a really kind of similar team in South Carolina that, has a great D-line like A&M does, can really run the football, but passing the football has been up and down with Lenora Sellers. Well, South Carolina's run game was great in this one. Raheem Sanders had 20 carries for 144 yards and 2 touchdowns, 119 yards after contact with 4 broken tackles. And Lenora Sellers, 15 carries for 106 yards and a touchdown. Dalton, he broke 12 tackles in this game for an 80% broken tackle rate. His previous career high for broken tackles was 3. He quadrupled his previous career high in this one against Texas A&M. So, like I said, this game is really going to come down to who runs the football better with kind of 2 raw passers playing quarterback, and South Carolina won that battle easily, and that's why I think ultimately they won this game.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. You're right. It was a game that was going to come down to the run games, right? Who was going to run it between the tackles and be the more physical football team, but that became South Carolina. If Lenora Sellers doesn't turn the football over, they're very, very hard to beat with their run game with Sanders and Sellers and their defense. And got to credit to the tight end Josh Simon with a great day also. They just gave him enough in the passing game. But no, I mean, A&M got out-physicaled in this game on both sides of the ball. And you mentioned it with Marcel Reed. That team falls behind. They're not going to want him to win with his arm, right? Yeah. I mean, even last week in a great game against LSU, what did he throw? 3 passes, I think it was. He had 1 big-time throw, but it's a team that needs to run the ball and needs to be the better defensive team. They did neither of those things in this game, and that's why they lost. And now we're going to be looking ahead to that game against Texas at Kyle Field, and somebody's season's going to be on the line, if not both teams.
It could be really interesting. And listen, Marcel Reed, I like him a lot. He's still a very, very young kid, but it's just kind of where you are right now is that Connor Wigman's not getting done as a passer, and then obviously Marcel Reed's just not ready as a passer. It's just like you're in a tough spot with this passing game for Texas A&M right now. So
it feels a lot like what Colin Klein dealt with at Kansas State last year. He's kind of got the same dynamic going there right now.
We might talk about that in just a second as well.
We will.
But let's go to the next game we're talking about, and that is another top 15 team going down. Louisville beating number 11 Clemson 33-21 to start off with the highest graded Cardinals in this victory. Highest graded one for them was their safety, D'Angelo Hutchinson, at 79.2. Corey Thornton, another player in that secondary at corner, at 75. Thor Griffith, the defensive tackle transfer from Harvard, at 74.3. Isaac Brown at a 73.6. I'll talk about him in a little bit. Pete Nigra, the center, at a 73.5. And then Tyler Shuck, the quarterback, at a 64.4. Let's go over to Clemson with their highest grade players in the loss for them. Linebacker Wade Woodaz with a 79 grade. Defensive tackle Peyton Page, 77.2. Running back Phil Maffa, 74.7. Jaden Lucas, the corner, 73.1. TJ Moore, the wide receiver, at a 71. And Cade Klubnik, the quarterback, 71.4. Dawn, for you, what was that to tell the story in this really impressive victory by Louisville?
It was very impressive, and I think there's a lot of angles here to take with Clemson. I'm going to go on the defensive side of the ball because we're going to talk about their offense in a minute. There has always been this element, even after Trevor Lawrence, even last year, when you're playing against Clemson, and especially at Clemson, and because of their defense, you still feel like, as an opponent, uncomfortable, right? Going back and watching this, because we were driving on the way back, so I caught the All-22 when we came back, right? At no point in this game did Louisville's offense look uncomfortable. At no point, not for a single play, did they look uncomfortable. And I think it starts, for me, this Clemson defense I don't think is on the elite level that we thought it usually is, right? Because it's always a top 5 to top 8 defense, right? But in this game, they pressured Tyler Shuck on 12 out of 34 dropbacks, like 35-ish%. It's okay, right? Only hit him once. no sacks, and they're as a team this year, they're 65th in the country in pass rush grade.
Yeah.
It's not great. Now Peter Woods got hurt in this game last night. He left the game early. It doesn't make it any better, certainly.
You were already neutralizing him before.
Yeah, I mean, he was playing off. They were putting him off the edge to experiment with, okay, we don't have a lot of edge rushers, so we'll put him outside. And I watch this Clemson defense right now. I think they're like pretty good, but they're not uncomfortably elite. Like last year when you saw offenses still like scared of their defense, right? You still had Trotter, you still had Nate Wiggins, you still had all these guys inside, right? And it just didn't. It never felt like Louisville. There was never any nerves about them. They were going to make plays after the catch. They were going to hand it to Isaac Brown. They were just going to kind of do what they want. Tyler Shuck, look, the grade there is a 64.4. Is it kind of mediocre? Sure, but he also didn't make any big mistakes. He was just going to allow the athletes to play, and they were going to grind it down. And they got stops on defense, to their credit. Louisville did, but I don't sense any fear right now from teams playing against this Clemson defense, and we have to wonder. I mean, I think we have to wonder on both sides if this run that they were just on since the Georgia loss is just a product of the teams they've played. Virginia, Stanford, Wake Forest, Florida State. This is the bottom tier of the ACC we're talking about. And now they get back to playing, we mentioned it, their toughest test. And I thought, you're getting into the offense now, but I thought they would have a chance against a Louisville defense that had been struggling. Okay, this was an opportunity to prove it. Now, Clemson, we are, 8-9 games into it for them, 8 games into it for them. And I don't feel like Clemson's proven anything.
They've proven nothing, which is why, again, them being in the top 10 at all, after a few weeks, which is insane to me because they got destroyed by Georgia. They played nobody, and then they got ranked in the top 10 because of that. And then, of course, they played another pretty good team in Louisville, and they lost by a pretty convincing margin again. So it's like the two really solid teams, good teams they played, they've lost convincingly.
They're right now a team that even if they finish 10-2, because they have Virginia Tech, who's underwhelmed, and Pitt, who just what just happened to Pitt last night. They're a team that at 10-2, if there's a kind of a mosh of 10-2 in the at-large spots there, they could get left out.
Oh, they probably should.
Because what's the signature? Even if they beat Pitt, that's their signature win for the season.
And dude,
I don't get it.
And just looking at what they've done in like I said, these 2 games where they have actually played real opponents, they've lost convincingly.
Yeah.
I never understood how they were even close to being a top 10 team in the AP poll, or for a lot of people even. I never understood it. I ranked them outside the top 15 the entire time, and now they've proven it. Now I don't even have them in my top 25 right now. I'll say right now, I don't even think they should be in the top 25 for what they've shown this year. But I'll get into the Clemson offense a little bit. They averaged 4.1 yards per pass in this game, Dalton, honestly, against the Louisville secondary that we've seen be vulnerable before. 56.9 receiving grade, 228 yards on 56 attempts. I don't even think Cade Klubnik was that bad. You saw he had a 71.4 grade, 68 passing grade. The problem was, and it reminded me a lot when I went back and watched it on the All-22, it reminded me of the Penn State game. It's like they can't get open for this guy right now, man. Honestly, so Clemson also, and this has been a problem for them in recent years like it has been for Penn State, they have a problem at wide receiver. When this used to be a school, again, like Penn State always had one superstar receiver. Clemson was always known as maybe a challenger to Ohio State and LSU as wide receiver U. They have been awful at receiver recently, really bad, and I think that really showed up in this game. Again, I don't even think I put too much blame on Klubnik in this one, even though on 56 pass attempts he only had 228 yards. I put the blame more on the receiving corps just for not being able to get open for him.
Yeah, it's the whole. It's back to we are back to square one with this Clemson offense. It's just there are times when this guy doesn't execute, where that guy doesn't execute. Yeah. It's just now it feels like we are right back to where we were after talking about them after that loss to Georgia.
All right, so we're done talking about the loser of this game. Let's go into the winner a little bit because it really was an impressive performance by Louisville in a game that a lot of people thought, even us, we both picked Clemson to win this game. So a really impressive game by Louisville. So Don, what to you was most impressive about the Cardinals' victory?
It was. I'm going to point out a guy in their secondary, and a secondary that I had criticized the last couple of weeks, right? And coming into this game was the reason I thought Clemson would win. But I got a fun little backstory. So obviously I used to coach down in St. Pete, right? And our defensive coordinator down there, Sean Davis, after our staff kind of had split up, he went to the next school up the road, okay, and he turned around that program in a year, okay? And one of the players he had, actually the main player he had that led that turnaround for a school that hadn't made the playoffs in 10 years, was now Louisville safety D'Angelo Hutchinson, right? And he was, at the time, he was playing receiver and corner and safety, playing all over the place, and this was his breakout game, right? I believe he's a sophomore this year, career-high 80 snaps in this game, 9 tackles, gave up 1 catch for 8 yards, 2 pass breakups, and blocked a field goal in the second half. Just all over the place, 81.2 run defense grade, 75.3 coverage grade. I'm telling you right now, my guy Sean Davis down in St. Pete knows how to make defensive backs. He got Anthony Johnson in the NFL. Right. He might get D'Angelo Hutchinson into the NFL now at Louisville. Spectacular breakout game from Hutchinson. I have to wonder if this gets him even more playing time moving forward. Before, special teamer, part-time player, would play like 20-something snaps a game. Breakout game for him, big-time stuff. Had to point out Hutchinson, of course, as the highest-graded Louisville player, and shout out my guy Sean Davis down in St. Pete. Great job coaching this kid. Look what he's doing now.
I love the personal touch, honestly, because I remember we went to the Louisville Miami game, and you pointed him out like, oh, that's D'Angelo Hutchinson kid. And, like, I didn't know too much about him, and you're like, I know he plays for them, and we didn't obviously talk about him after the game was over. But now he was the highest-graded player for Louisville. It's not even like you're being a little bit of a homer by pointing him out. No, he actually was like a star for.
And I didn't grade the game. I don't grade the games anymore. That wasn't me. I didn't rig it up either. Don't worry.
My most impressive was Isaac Brown, dude. This guy is awesome. So good.
Another true freshman, right?
Another one. We'll probably won't draft him in the all-eligible mock draft, considering it's only a first round, and we're not, again, if we put too many running backs in the first round, we're going to get fired here at PFF. But Isaac Brown, regardless, has been an incredible player for Louisville this year. 19 carries for 150 yards and a touchdown, 7.9 yards per carry, 4.5 yards after contact per carry, 5 runs of 10-plus yards. Also, I want to point this out as well, because it's something that gets forgotten about consistently with running backs. He had 6 pass blocking snaps and not a lot of pressure either. So against a pretty big Clemson defensive line, it's pretty good for that running back. And Dalton, for you as a guy who is against all the stars and all that, this is a guy that actually is kind of proving you right now, because he was a 3-star recruit coming out of high school, and immediately in his true freshman year, he has been a star for this Louisville offense. So big shout out to Isaac Brown. They lost a lot in that run game from last year. Obviously, Isaac Garendo leaving, Jawar Jordan leaving as well. They got a new one in Isaac Brown, and he is a star that's going to be there for hopefully the next 3 years for Louisville, and maybe even longer than that, and he's going to be a really, really good player.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's been the engine all year, and it's so impressed, because you mentioned it, they kind of had a committee going for a while, but it's not a committee anymore. It's Isaac Brown's show.
Absolutely. So before we get to the other games that we're going to talk about today, we got to talk about one of our sponsors on this show, and that is the amazing product, Cheri Bundi, the performance drink that is fueling the Health Fleet revolution. It's got natural products and ingredients with no added sugar. Tart cherries are the highest antioxidant fruit or vegetable in the entire world. It's a natural anti-inflammatory with incredible benefits like reduced soreness, increased recovery, and it contains naturally occurring melatonin to help you improve your sleep. And again, we're not getting a lot of sleep considering all the road trips we're doing right now. It helps support your immunity. It's used by nearly 500 collegiate and professional sports teams. Every NFL team uses Cheri Bundi. 10 of the last 11 Super Bowl champions have used Cheri Bundi as a part of their daily regimen. Every team playing in Europe or Brazil this year had Cheri Bundi with them. All but one Power 4 conference football team uses Cheri Bundi. And how about this? Every football and basketball national champion since 2007, last 18 or so years of national champions, have used Cheri Bundi as a part of their daily regimen as well. Their products are available on Amazon, cheribundi.com, and at retailers nationwide, including Publix and Kroger. So Dalton, this is a great product for you. It tastes deliciously, and like I said, with all the road trips we're doing, all the horrible stuff that we're eating at gas stations all across the country, we need a product like this to kind of clean out our system and help us sleep, and Cheri Bundi's been amazing at that.
You're darn right. I also kind of like the term health lead. I feel like I need to become one of those. Maybe it'll help me with that.
We are far away from being health leads.
Yeah,
we're not healthy, and we're not athletes.
We got to work on it. Yeah.
We're not even half of any of those, honestly. So yeah, we're not healthy or athletes. So I doubt we can be health leads. But with Cheri Bundi, maybe we can become health leads. So check out Cheri Bundi. It's an amazing product. All right, next game we're talking about is Texas Tech beating number 11 Iowa State, ruining their undefeated season 23-22. And Dalton, this is actually a game that if Iowa State won the game, it would have been their first 8-0 start in program history. Well, Texas Tech ruined that with a 1-point victory over them. Let's go over the highest graded Red Raiders in this one. Josh Kelly, the receiver, who I'll talk about in a little bit, 73 grade. Taj Brooks, the running back, 71 grade. Trayvon McAlpine at a 70.5, the D tackle. Quincy Ledet Jr., 69.9, another D tackle. CJ Baskerville, the safety, 68.7. And Baron Morton, the quarterback, at a 56.1. won. Let's go over to the Iowa State side with their highest graded players in this loss, the first loss of the year for the Cyclones. Jontez Williams, the corner, at 80.5. Jaden Higgins, the wide receiver, 80.3. Abu Sama III, a running back, at 76.1. Malik Verdon, the safety, 74.2. Darian Porter, the corner, at a 72.8. And Rocco Becht with a 49.7 grade. Dalton, for you, what was the stat that tells the story?
Okay. I'm just going to say it. Iowa State should have won this game. And two things happen when you have a team that should have won a game and did not. One is turnovers, and what is it? They turned the ball over twice in this game, I believe. And the other is just not finishing drives, and that's where I'm going to go. Usually here I would go with the red zone spiel. I'm going to expand that a little further to Texas Tech's 30-yard line if we want to pick a different name for it inside the 30. I don't know, yellow zone or whatever. But either way, okay, so inside the Texas Tech 30-yard line in this game. All right, Iowa State ran 11 plays. You got 62 yards, 20 of them on a Jaden Higgins touchdown late in the first half, okay? They kicked 2 field goals. They had a turnover on downs in the second quarter. They caught a ball, actually. There was a ball that they threw from the 32 that got down to the 14 and was fumbled by Gabe Burkle. They get down to the goal line in the fourth quarter to the 1, actually. Then it's a false start. And then they get to the 3, and they're stuffed on fourth down there, or on third down there, I should say, and kicked a field goal there. And inside the 30-yard line of Texas Tech, they had a minus .319 EPA per play. They moved the ball all day. They did. They got inside Texas Tech's 30. They did not finish drives, and they just kept letting Texas Tech hang around and hang around and hang around. Even the touchdown they took the lead on with, about a minute and a half, 2 minutes. I think it was a little over 2 minutes to go, actually, about 2 minutes and 10 seconds. That was a long play. That was an explosive play, curl route. They broke a bunch of tackles and they got a 40-something yard touchdown. But when they got down in or near the red zone, they just didn't make things happen. And they kept Texas Tech in this game over and over and over when they didn't finish opportunities. They scored 22 points in this game. You could argue they should have scored about 38, honestly, because they just didn't punch it in when they needed to. Texas Tech kept floating around. They put together one good drive. They finished the one drive that they needed to, and that was it. I think Iowa State looks at this game going, this is a game we should have won. Mm-hmm. And I would agree with that, honestly. And yes, Texas Tech, they made the plays when they needed to. Taj Brooks had a reasonably big second half. Josh Kelly had a huge day. They made plays when they needed to. But Iowa State they have to walk away from this game feeling sick because they didn't finish drives. It's that simple. They did not finish drives at all.
A reason going into that as well is Rocco Becht, kind of concerning trend for him. 49.6 grade, like I just said, 52.8 passing grade. Dalton, he had a 49.2 in their last game as well against UCF. There's only been one game as bad as those 2 games he's had back-to-back all of last year. So this is a concerning trend for Rocco Becht right now. He had 4 turnover-worthy plays as the most in a game in his career. Yes, it was raining out, and yes, it was hard to throw the football. Obviously, you saw Baron Morton also struggle out there as well. But Rocco Becht is supposed to be like the guy for this Iowa State offense with those receivers he's got, and Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel as well. And really, it's kind of like a little bit of the Texas A&M thing. Obviously, Abu Sama's a pretty good running back as well. But if Iowa State's passing attack is not getting going, they have a lot of issues offensively. This is not a team that's going to outmuscle you on either side of offense or defense, obviously. So, yeah, I think Rocco Becht has got to be the guy for them. In the last 2 games, they almost lost to UCF as well a couple weeks ago. Last 2 games he's played, he's had a lot of struggles as a passer. He's got to get it figured out if they want to, get back in the race of the Big 12.
For sure, and I'm going to turn that around to my most impressive. I will give the Texas Tech secondary some credit for having themselves a good day because it was obviously the biggest question coming into this game. They had the 4th lowest coverage grade as a team in the Power 5. So I'm sitting here going, well, that's a mismatch. Rocco should tee off, right? Like that's just like everybody else has. But no, look, as a team, a 63.7 coverage grade. It's not great, but it's actually, I think it's the 2nd or 3rd best for Texas Tech this season. So they at least kept it together. A.J. McCarty with an interception. Chapman Lewis with a good day at safety. C.J. Baskerville you mentioned there. And they only allowed 2 deep completions the entire day. Was it great? Was it the highest graded thing, the greatest thing you've ever seen? No, but they did keep things in front of them for the most part. Both of those deep completions in the first half. And the guy that I kept thinking was going to win the game for Iowa State, because he always does, is Jalen Noel. And they held him to 43 yards. So Jaden Higgins had a big day, but Jalen Noel didn't. You hold one of those guys down, you stand a better chance. I thought Texas Tech, at the very least, Will I tell you they're the best secondary in the country after this game? Absolutely not. But they kept things in front of them. There was less mental mistakes, and they kept the team in the game just long enough for Morton to go down and win it.
Absolutely. My most impressive part was Josh Kelly going to the other side of it. I mean, he was targeted 18 times against Iowa State. He caught 8 of those for 127 yards and 2 touchdowns. He was targeted on nearly 41% of his routes. Every time there's an obvious passing down for Texas Tech, everybody knew where that ball was going. And yet he still dealt with he still performed like pretty well with 2 touchdowns and 130 yards. And honestly, Dalton, a lot of the targets he had were off-target throws. So I understand a lot of people hearing, wait a minute, he was targeted 18 times when they caught 8 of them. Baron Morton was struggling getting him the football, and he still made some really, really impressive catches. So he was a great compliment in this game, because I thought going into it, Texas Tech was going to win this game off of Taj Brooks, who also had a good game, but they were also able to find something with Josh Kelly in the passing game as well. So he was a great compliment to Taj Brooks, and without him, they would not have been close to winning this game.
Absolutely, and Kelly was a good player with Washington State with Cam Ward throwing him the ball. This is a really good football player. He's having a great year for Texas Tech. And again, props to him for just grinding through it and finding a way to win this one, and really keeping themselves, it's a very outside shot, but keeping themselves at least somewhat near, in striking distance for this Big 12 race, and Iowa State losing really upends it as far as the rest of the top of the Big 12.
And not only that, Dolan, another one that really upends it is number 17 Kansas State also going down. Houston beating them 24-19, really opening the door for the Colorado Buffaloes in that Big 12 race right now. Let's go over the highest graded players, though, starting off with the victorious Houston Cougars. Tight end Malik Carr, a guy that we love going into the year, was the highest grade player for them in this game, 80.2 grade. Cornerback Jeremiah Wilson, 75.5. Johnny Carter, the other corner, at a 72.9. David Ndukwe at a 72.4, the offensive tackle. Hershey McLaurin, the safety, 72.1. And Zion Chris, the quarterback, performing pretty admirably with a 71.1 grade in the victory. Let's go over to the Kansas State side with their highest grade players and their loss. Edge defender Brendan Mott at a 78.8. Linebacker Austin Moore at a 78.7. Another linebacker Desmond Purnell, 78.2. And another linebacker, Austin Romaine, 75.6. Easton Kilty, the offensive tackle, at a 75.2. And Avery Johnson with a 71.9 grade. Dawn, for you, what was stat that told the story?
Do you want my obvious statement of the week? Kansas State just didn't get it done in the second half. They ran 36 plays in the second half, 162 total yards. On the surface, okay, it is what it is. 61 of those 162 there was a Jace Brown go ball in the third quarter that set up a field goal. And so you look at their other 35 plays, they got 101 yards off of it. You're talking about less than 3 yards of play for an entire second half outside of one play. 31 rushing yards when they were in a game that they were ahead 16-10 and then 19-10. 2 interceptions from Avery Johnson. And the first one really turned this game upside down. I mean, K-State had control of this game, 19-10, throws an interception inside their own red zone there. I mean, K-State, they got ahead in this game, and usually if they're ahead in the second half, they're going to win. And they just made enough mistakes, and they just couldn't keep it rolling. Houston just refused to go away in this game. Kansas State could not find any rhythm in the second half. And then once it got away from them and they get in obvious passing situations, we've said it all year. That's the identity of K-State. That's the kryptonite, is you put them in obvious passing situations, you get Avery Johnson in drop back situations. It's just not really going to happen for them outside of, an occasional go ball to Jace Brown or Avery Johnson improvising back there because he's the fastest player on the field. Their passing game by design just doesn't have a whole lot in it. And so now if you have a team like Houston that stopped the run and you're going into that, you don't have any other answers. So once again, it's a different way of going about it because they did have a 2-score lead, but this is part of K-State's identity, is they get in games like this where they don't have a ton of answers on offense. The one answer they do have is usually spectacular, but we've seen it in the 2 games that they didn't. They blew it. I mean, the BYU game, they didn't have it from the very start, and in this game, they didn't get in their wheelhouse enough, and eventually they needed Avery Johnson to save them, and it just feels like he's not ready to do that. He had the one big go ball, same ball that he threw in this game to Brown, the one big go ball against Colorado, which did save him, but your chances of just winning on a lottery ticket 60-yard go ball, it's usually pretty low, and that's all they have in their offense right now on the passing side.
Exactly, and the way to get Kansas State into obvious passing downs is to stop the run. And Houston did an amazing job in this one. Kansas State averaged 2.9 yards per carry against Houston. They really had to rely on Avery Johnson as a passer. And if you do that, like you said, any team can beat Kansas State if you really take away the run for Kansas State. And Houston, who's been one of the worst teams in the Big 12 this year, they beat them because they took away the run. DJ Giddens, 50 yards on 17 carries. Dylan Edwards, 31 yards on 8 carries. Avery Johnson, who's a really good dual threat quarterback, 18 yards on 8 carries. Only 6 broken tackles total on runs. And Dalton, before contact, Kansas State averaged 0.1 yards. 0.1 yards before contact per carry. Houston was doing an excellent job of hitting the running backs and hitting Avery Johnson immediately at the line of scrimmage, and also not missing tackles either, because that could be a big thing as well. DJ Giddens being a really dangerous player. Avery Johnson could break tackles as well. They tackled well, and they hit him early, and that's what you got to do against Kansas State, and Houston did an excellent job in that. And like I said, if you take away the run game, anybody can beat Kansas State.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Houston, they did look early in the season like it was a big-time struggle, but Willie Fritz is starting to turn that thing around. And honestly, it sounds funny because this was an ugly football game, but I'm going to give Zion Chris, the quarterback, credit for my most impressive. And not just in this game, in the rain, especially late in the game, it was pouring, right? But went 11 for 11 with 103 yards and a touchdown, a 78 passing grade. Okay, 19 carries for 99 yards, game-winning touchdown run, right? But I think what needs to be said about Chris is, look, this is a guy who transferred in from Louisiana, knowing that he was coming to Houston. He wasn't going to start over Donovan Smith right away, right? Donovan Smith's pretty entrenched, but they start 1-5. Zion Chris, in all 3 games that he started and finished, okay, their loss to Kansas, he played like 10 snaps or something, and he got hurt. He missed the rest of the game. They've won all 3 of those games. They're 3-0 with Zion Chris when he starts and finishes a game, and they're 1-5 otherwise. I look at Houston, and yeah, we gave them a lot of flack early in the season, but they started 1-5. I get it, right? But all of a sudden they're 4-5.
Yeah.
Or they started 1-4, and then they won 3 of the next 4. So I mean, he's kind of just given them this stable presence, and it's look, they've needed their defense to play a lot better, which they have. Their run game is picked up because Chris honestly can run the ball better than Donovan Smith. Donovan Smith he's a big guy, but he's not a great athlete you're going to center your run game around. Chris is doing a really nice job just managing this thing. I think he really gritted it out in this game. In a game they were down 2 scores. They were down 19-10 in the fourth quarter. I think he deserves a lot of credit for making plays when he needed to make them. The defense deserves a lot of credit. But yeah, with him, the 3 games he started and finished, they've won all of them. So Houston right now, they're not the gimme opponent that we thought they were earlier in the year, especially before Chris started playing quarterback. This is a team they could continue to be dangerous with the style of ball they play, and Willie Fritz obviously knows how to build a program like he did at Tulane. Yeah,
absolutely. He's a great program builder. Willie Fritz is. And Dalton, if you told me preseason, like, hey, Houston's actually going to be better than you think, I would say, oh wow, Donovan Smith finally put it together. Donovan Smith, the guy that a lot of people think is one of the highest ceilings in college football. I saw a lot of people consider him one of the top quarterbacks in the NFL draft. He was horrible, and he got benched for Zion Chris. If you told me that, I'd be like, oh, Houston's going to go like 1-11 or 2-10 this year. No, they're winning ball games. They're winning big-time ball games like this one. So great shout-out by you because, yeah, maybe he doesn't show up in the grades. It's like, oh, he's the highest-grade player. But that is a really hard spot for him to be in, and he came through for the Cougars. My guy, another guy who really didn't wow anyone with the grades, but Michael Batten, another one. It's 87.4 run defense grade, though. That was a big part of it. He had 3 run D stops, 1 tackle for loss or no gain. The linebacker did for Houston. Also, at the very end, he had the game-sealing interception as well. So that linebacker was a star for Houston. And don't we say it time and time again? You said it time and time again, honestly. It is so hard to play linebacker against Kansas State, and yet Michael Batten was balling for Houston. So just insanely great performance by all of Houston's run defense, but Michael Batten specifically. And at the very end of the game, he made the game-sealing pick to win it, honestly, too. So really impressive performance from Michael Batten in that one.
Yeah, great stuff. Great stuff. In Houston, look, they kept themselves in the ball game, just very similar to how Texas Tech did. They kept themselves in it, gave themselves one chance to win it, and they executed. So, you get the Big 12 turned a little bit upside down this week, and I think the race for especially that second spot, I think we really like BYU at the very top. But
yeah, they will.
Now you got a real dead heat between Iowa State, Kansas State, and Colorado for that second spot, and you're gonna see it get real tense here down the stretch, especially with Iowa State and Kansas State playing each other at the very end.
Yeah, and honestly, Kansas State needs help from Colorado now. Honestly, they need Colorado to lose a game.
Yeah, because now Colorado's
ahead of them now. Yeah, K-State's got 2 conference losses.
The number of scenarios that just came up in the Big 12 now with these two upsets. It's going to be a roller coaster down the stretch.
I don't know who is currently in with the tiebreakers, because I know Iowa State and Colorado are tied right now at the top. It would be interesting. I'm sure actually we can just find the standings right now and it will tell us. But it's going to be really interesting to find at the end of the year, man, because right now I agree with you. BYU does have a pretty solid lead. I think Iowa State's still ahead of Colorado. It's at least what ESPN's telling me. So right now,
it gets real intricate with that, with teams who haven't played each other and all that. So I'll worry about the tiebreak part at the end if we get there for sure, because the SEC is going to be a whole big thing like that too, I'm sure. But no, it's wide open in the Big 12 now. It is going to be just an insane last 4 weeks in the Big 12.
Definitely. All right, let's go over to the other ranked game that we had besides the Penn State-Ohio State game. That was number 20 SMU beating number 18 Pitt and ruining their undefeated season by a 48-25 final score. Let's go over to the highest graded Mustangs in this victory, starting off with defensive tackle Jared Harrison Hunt at his 86.6, offensive tackle PJ Williams 80.4, Ahmad Walker the linebacker 79.1, Cale Sanders Jr. the corner at 78.4, Jafari Harvey 76.3, and how about Kevin Jennings bouncing back big time with an 81.7 grade in that win. Pitt, their highest graded players, starting off with tight end Jake Overman 80.3, Chief Borders, the edge defender, 78.8, another edge defender, Jimmy Scott, 78.7. Then you got Kenny Johnson, wide receiver, to 68.8, Jason Collier Jr., the offensive guard, at 68.3, and Eli Holstein struggling out there with a 52.8 grade. Dawn, for you, what was the stat that told the story?
This is just about SMU getting out ahead early and staying out there and just keep running, man. I think SMU, we think of them as like spread out and high flying and everything Preston Stone did last year. And Kevin Jennings been fantastic. We've talked about him a lot. Great bounce back for him after probably the worst game of his entire life last week, right? Even though they got the win. And you saw when they don't turn the ball over 6 times, SMU's pretty darn good, right? But I think the big thing is they have balance. And you talk about in this first half, okay, SMU, 22 runs, 19 passes. They got out ahead. They got Pitt out of their game early, right? Because I don't think Pitt wants to rely as much on Eli Holstein as they had to in this game. Pitt in the first half ran 39 plays, and only 7 of them were designed runs. So you're talking about one team had 145 yards and 3 touchdowns on the ground in the first half, and the other team with Pitt and Desmond Reed had 37 yards. They got out ahead. They leaned on the run game. We talked about, what do you do against this Pat Narduzzi defense? Do you take your shots, or do you try to grind and out-physical them and figure out another way? SMU went with the latter. They ran the ball like crazy in the first half. They decided to make plays after the catch and hit quick hitters to the field side where there's a little bit less press coverage than the backside. Sometimes they'll still do it on both sides, but it's more so to the backside where you have that solo receiver a lot of times set up in trips, and on that trip side they'll be a little bit more off in traditional quarters. This was just Rhett Lashley, just a fantastic game plan all the way around. I mean, it's hard for really one stat to me to sum it up, because SMU just came out there with a better football team in this game.
It was not even close. Yeah, honestly, in the first half especially, it was over. This game was over at halftime. And I know Pitt did make a little bit of a comeback in the second half to make this look a little bit closer, but it was 31-3 at halftime. Like, this game was over at halftime. I said to tell the stories, really the EPA per play splits in the first half compared to the other two teams. But SMU, .365 EPA per play in the first half, averaged 7.8 yards per play, 6.6 yards per carry, 9.7 yards per pass. Pitt, negative .193 EPA per play in the first half, 4.5 yards per play, 2.8 yards per carry, and 5.5 yards per pass. One offense in the first half got whatever they wanted. The other got stonewalled in this game. So really, again, like I said, this game was over at halftime, and SMU just came out immediately, and we thought, okay, well, how are they going to come out after that really shaky performance against Duke? They cleaned it all up, and they dominated Pitt in that first half.
Coach Lashley must have tore into him after that one.
They were running sprints up and down the stairs of the stadium.
They were doing ball security drills all week. They were making sure there was going to be no fumbles this week for sure. But no, they came out. They looked fantastic. And I'll tell you, I mean, SMU, with what we saw from Clemson, and now what we saw, obviously, the way they beat Pitt, and then there's some other contenders who kind of fell. SMU right now is probably the clear primary challenger to Miami, and they've got a favorable schedule the rest of the way. And I think we have to sit here and go, Miami and SMU have the inside track to the ACC. Obviously, they're the only 2 teams left undefeated in conference, but they also kind of just look like the 2 best teams.
They really do. And honestly, look at their schedule. SMU's got Boston College, at Virginia, and then Cal to close out the season. Clemson needs them to lose one of those 3 games. And even then, tiebreakers, I don't know what happens there. Because it's still tied with Clemson. If Clemson wins out as well.
It might be an issue with, it might be a common opponent issue depending on who they lose to, because SMU beat Louisville.
Yeah.
So SMU's got a very clear track, and obviously it'd be easier for them to just win their last 3 games and get there. But it sure feels like right now they're the second best team in the conference.
I would agree with that. Yeah. So Dalton, for you, though, what was the most impressive part of this SMU victory?
Tell you what, we were kind of jumping on this SMU offensive line early in the year, and they're getting better and better every single week. So their starting offensive line, all right, they didn't play the last 4 drives. They really didn't need to play much in the fourth quarter, right? Their starting offensive line had a 77.9 overall grade in this game. It might have been their best mark of the season. I got to fiddle with some things because they didn't play the whole game in this one. They did not allow a single pressure the entire game. Not their offensive line, not a single. Their starting O-line. I think there was like some backups the last 10, 12 snaps that came in, gave up a couple. Their starting O-line gave up 0 pressures in 3+ quarters.
And Narduzzi with that, all the blitz packages he sends.
Well,
it gets complicated with
they picked him up. They picked up every single one of them, and there was no. And in the run game, they were really good too. Logan Parr and those guys up front and their offensive line, they're really starting to figure it out. And again, part of having balance is having guys who can block, and they've got them right now. They're getting better every week, and they just dominated this football game.
Absolutely. And one guy who really benefited from having that offensive line be dominant was Brashard Smith, their running back. He is awesome, dude. He had 23 carries for $161 and 2 touchdowns, 5 carries of 10+ yards, 4 broken tackles. And also, as a receiver, he had 4 catches for 21 yards and a touchdown as well. So 3 total touchdowns for him, 182 yards total for Brashard Smith as well. There are so many amazing running backs in college football, and obviously we try to talk about as many as we can every single week. He has become one of the most underrated ones that we have in the nation right now, thanks to his ability as a rusher and a receiver. Pitt had no answers for him as a dual threat running back, and I think he was a former receiver in college.
Well, you could tell the toe drag catch of the touchdown that he had in this game. It was I saw that play, and I thought it was a receiver, and I was like, wait, that's Brashard. That's crazy. Like, no, he's super talented. He's having maybe the most like you mentioned, the most underrated year of any running back in the country. And he's really them working the rest of the offense off of him. It wasn't quite like that last year with SMU. They were a little more of straight drop back and kind of spread out. Them working through the run game through Brashard Smith and then building off of it with Kevin Jennings.
Yep.
That's really why their offense is succeeding right now, and again, why they're in such a great position in the ACC.
Definitely. All right, let's go over to the world's largest outdoor cocktail party, and Georgia emerging victorious over Florida, and maybe a closer game than a lot of people expected going into it. Number 2 Georgia winning this game 34-20. Let's go over the highest graded players, starting off with the Georgia Bulldogs. Highest graded player was true freshman 5-star safety KJ Bolden at 83.3 grade. Number 2 linebacker CJ Allen 81.4. Jared Wilson, the center, 77.8. Running back Nate Frazier, 77.3. Chaz Chambliss, the edge defender, at a 75.7. And Carson Beck with a 59.1 grade in this one. Going over to Florida with their highest graded players in their loss. Safety Aaron Gates at 87.1. Devin Moore, the corner, 82.7. Jake Slaughter, the center, at a 69.9. Tyreek Sapp, the edge defender, 67.8. Jack Pyburn, the edge defender, 67.1. And then the third string quarterback, Aiden Warner, had to play in this one with a 42.1 grade because DJ Lagway went down with what seemed to be a serious, I think, hamstring injury. And hopefully he's not out for the entire season, but it looked pretty bad, honestly. And I think he was in street clothes and on crutches during the game. So hopefully, obviously, we hope DJ Lagway is healthy from that. But that kind of is what killed Florida in this game, just losing their star freshman quarterback.
Yeah, and that's kind of where it starts for me. It's not so much a stat, I guess, is just what happened here. I think it is reasonable to think, at least reasonable to think, that they could have beaten Georgia if DJ Lagway would have been able to play the whole game. I mean, that's just where this game turned. They were up 10-3 at the time that happened.
He made some throws, too.
He made a big touchdown throw after a Carson Beck interception that got him that touchdown. And even then, look, the game was tied with 5 minutes to go. I mean, they still were in it as long as they were in it. If they had Lagway instead of Warner in there, and Warner, look,
it's a tough spot.
Redshirt freshman, walk-on. I mean, just got to Florida in the spring.
I didn't know he's a walk-on.
Yeah, I believe he transferred up from an FCS school as a walk-on and joined the team. I mean, it's a tough spot to be in, right? And obviously, you're going, okay, now you're going against Kirby Smart and really your first real action here. And that's where it went. He was 7 of 22 for 66 yards, an interception, 3 turnover-worthy plays. So their offense on those first 4 drives with Lagway, okay, team grade on offense, 66.4. The rest of the way with Warner at the helm, it was a 52. They just couldn't – They don't have enough. I mean, the Gators have enough. They have a hard enough time winning ball games when they had Graham Mertz and when they had DJ Lagway, and now you've got a third stringer in there who's just really not ready to play a game of this caliber. Georgia's defense eventually was just too much for them to handle. And even then, again, the game was tied with 5 minutes left. I think that's the story of this game, is it's very reasonable to think if Lagway got to play the whole game, which I didn't think would be the case. We both picked Georgia by a pretty good margin, but I think there's some things to worry about here with Georgia going through this game, because even then, I mean, they score, then they get the interception. It looks like a 14-point game. Oh, they went and beat them by 2 scores. It was easy. It was not easy. The 14 points that made that margin were scored in the last 4 minutes. So, I think Georgia, I don't even know what to make of this game for them against Ole Miss next week. I have no idea at this point. From all the chaos we've seen in college football, the way Ole Miss now suddenly looks like Ole Miss the last 2 weeks. Georgia, you get a big Texas win, you come back, you look shaky against Florida. I know some people will just call it the rivalry, but you had Carson Beck with 3 more interceptions. I mean, it's shaky. It is shaky with Georgia, especially offensively.
Yeah, it really is, honestly. And yeah, it's a great point. They really probably would have lost this game if DJ Lagway played. And it's just, again, not trying to go against Aiden Warner too much or talk bad about him, because really,
he's just not ready for a spot. It's an awful spot to get your first extended action
also,
like that.
Got to remember, it's like he's not the backup either. He's a third-string quarterback.
Right.
It's not like they had Graham Mertz. Like, Graham Mertz is out for the year. Now maybe DJ Lagway's out for the year. Like, it's just it's a really brutal injuries on top of a brutal schedule for Florida. Really, maybe the most unluckiest team in college football that we got right now. One of them, at least. It's just rough. And then another quarterback who struggled, Dalton, but this one should not have struggled. Carson Beck, 56.3 passing grade in this one. Second straight game, he has a below a 60 passing grade. Dalton, before these last 2 games, he never, ever was below a 60 passing grade. In his entire career before this. 0 big-time throws, 3 turnover-worthy plays, 3 interceptions. This is his 3rd straight game with multiple interceptions. His 4th game this year with multiple interceptions. In his career, he never had multiple interception games. Now he has 3 straight and 4 this year. The big problem when I watched Carson Beck, I actually, late last night, I went and watched some Beck last year compared to this year. What was working last year? What is not working this year? What going into the year, one of his biggest negatives going into the year, it was, he's not aggressive enough, he's too conservative, whatever. Now, he is way too aggressive. He's trying to put the team on his back. He is not that quarterback. He's not that kind of guy. And last year, what made him so elite was that he knew what his job was, and he was complimenting the great weapons that they had in Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey, who both, by the way, are excelling in the NFL. So that's a big story, too, is that, hey, they don't have those guys anymore, and they don't have anyone else right now who's even close to those guys. Like I said, now he's over-aggressive. Now he's forcing it. He is nowhere close to being a first-round pick, at least the way he's playing right now. And like I said, he probably would have lost this game if DJ Lagway did not go down. So I think Carson Beck is like not as extreme, but Noah Fafita is kind of the same way. It's like he's not playing his game anymore. Now he's trying to be someone he's not, and that's the reason why he's been struggling so much.
And you remember what I talked about in our preview, the splits? We talked about play action and no play action. Yeah. In this game, play action, 73 passing grade, no play action, 46.1. Yeah. It is going to continue to be a thing. I think we are just here at this point. We're in November now. Georgia is not a team that can just drop back and throw the football.
Nope.
They can't. They have to run it. They have to go with play action. They have to protect Carson Beck when he's in play action. It's just not. He's really actually been one of the lesser quarterbacks in the Power 5 in true drop back situations. And right now, it makes you wonder if he's throwing deeper shots like that, expecting okay, I have to elevate these guys because I don't have McConkey and Bowers, right? They could elevate me. It's not good. What does he have? 10 or 11 interceptions in the last 5 games?
Yeah, he had just 7 all last year.
I mean, and the third one in this game was batted up in the air and it was weird, but the first 2, I mean, they were pretty egregious. I mean, it's not good. He's making mistakes all year. This has been the case. They get in play action, cool. They'll be fine. The linebackers step up, O-line, Nate Frazier, Trevor Etienne, whoever. But they can't just sit there and drop back and throw the football. They can't do it. And they did it for the second half against Bama because he was chucking it up because he had nothing to lose. But it's not there. It hasn't been there all year. It's honestly, this isn't news.
No, and I think there's a comp that a lot of people float around, and I actually like the comp going into the year was Jared Goff. And Jared Goff in the NFL is a quarterback that is really reliant on his supporting cast. I think the Goff comparison holds, but in college, Carson Beck is the Jared Goff of college football, where if he does not have elite weapons, like Jared Goff at Cal didn't have like elite stuff around him, and he was playing at a great level, and why he was the number 1 overall pick and all that.
And you see a similar split here as you usually see with Goff is clean, solid, pressured. He threw all 3 interceptions under pressure.
But even like now the comparison, I don't even like that much anymore because I think Carson Beck is the Jared Goff of college football, which means in the NFL it's even more extreme, right? So like that's a big problem when you're trying to project him to the NFL as well, is that Goff was at least great in college without a lot around him, and now in the NFL he is reliant. But when you have great stuff around him, he's really good. Beck in college is like this. That's a really scary sign for him going to the next level. It's like, hey, if you don't have that in the NFL, it's going to be even worse than that. So, yeah, I think that's a really scary sign because Goff, remember with the Rams initially, when they didn't have a lot of stuff around him, he really struggled. And then obviously going to the Lions, he's been great. Beck is kind of like that in Georgia right now, where last year they had Brock Bowers, they had Ladd McConkey and a great offensive line. He was playing at a great level. This year they lose those weapons, and he does not look anything like that so far this year. So it's kind of a scary sign for Carson Beck right now. But Dalton, ultimately, though, what was the most impressive part of this near upset for Florida?
I'll just give the Gators coverage unit their credit, man. I mean, I've criticized them all year, but they were good enough to win this game. It's just their offense put their defense in impossible spots. 66.5 team coverage grade, actually not that bad for the Florida Gators. Got the 3 interceptions, and one more thing on Beck, 10-plus yard throws. You mentioned working vertically down the field, just a 46.8 passing grade. The Gators defense was not bad in this game. They were just put in an impossible spot to win the game. And honestly, until the last, 4 minutes, they kept them in position to possibly win this game, even with Aiden Warner at quarterback.
Definitely. All right, so I'll go into one impressive part about Georgia, because we've been talking a lot about how, this is awful by Georgia. They still won the game, though, honestly. And I think a big part of that was that their offensive line has just been continued to be elite. So like I mentioned before, the supporting cast for Carson Beck this year is worse than last year. That's the receiving core. This offensive line is still playing at a really, really good level, especially protecting the quarterback. 86.8 pass blocking grade in this game. 0 sacks, 1 hit allowed on 43 snaps. Only 5 pressures allowed all game for Georgia's offensive line. Jared Wilson, the guy we just showed as one of the highest graded players, he's been one of the best centers in college football this year. He didn't lose a single rep in pass blocking. He didn't allow pressure, and he also wasn't even beaten by his defender once either. Ernest Green also didn't lose a single rep, one of the offensive tackles for Georgia. So really the one thing that they can really hang their hat on offensively is that this offensive line is really, really elite at protecting Carson Beck. But other than that, I mean, in that receiving core, and even with Carson Beck right now, they've got issues. But that offensive line, and even the run game, has been pretty solid for them this year as well. It's really all they have to hang their hat on right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great thing when you have a top 5 or 10 offensive line in the country. That does help a lot, and they give Beck a chance to succeed. But the rest of it, I would be very worried with the way their passing game has looked basically all season. I'd be very worried about Georgia in playoff situations and in a national title situation, because you put them head-to-head against, say, an Ohio State right now, it'll look the same as the game yesterday, the Penn State play. You just see nobody will get open.
Yeah, I think Austin Dwyer is a really amazing stat. I think this might be true, too. He said this is the first time ever a quarterback has won back-to-back games with 3 interceptions. Crazy.
Ever?
That's what he said, at least. I don't know if that's true. I have to look it up, but that's pretty, 3 interceptions back-to-back games and won both those games. That's interesting.
I figured there's some gunslingers out there.
Maybe. We'll have to get that fact check.
We'll have to look into that.
But if true, we'll that's pretty insane by Carson Beck there. But last game we're talking about before we get into our playoff bracket. We're actually not doing top 25 today. We're going to do a full college football playoff bracket because college football playoff rankings come out on Tuesday. So we're going to give out what the playoff will look like right now, in our opinion, if it comes out. But last game we're talking about before that is number 5 Miami beating Duke 53-31. Let's go over the highest graded players, starting off with the Hurricanes. Xavier Estrepo, like clockwork, has been one of the highest graded players for the Hurricanes. 82.7 grade. Cornerback OJ Frederick Jr., 77.7. Running back Damian Martinez, 76.9. Akeem Mesidor, 76.5. The D tackle. Mark Fletcher Jr., the other running back, 74.4. And Cam Ward, your new Heisman Trophy favorite according to the betting odds, 79.9 grade in the victory. Let's go over to Duke with their highest graded players in this one. Wide receiver Samir Hagans at 87.2. Cornerback Chandler Rivers had a 76.6 grade. Defensive tackle Aaron Hall, 74.4. Running back Peyton Jones at a 73.5. Vincent Anthony Jr., the edge defender, 70.3. And then Malik Murphy with a 57 grade in the loss for Duke, as you can see right there. So it wasn't a great performance for Malik Murphy right there, but Duke was in this game a little bit, Dalton. They had a 11-point lead in the third quarter.
They were up 28-17 in the third quarter.
And then Miami stormed back, obviously. But what was that the total story for you?
As they do, as Miami does all of the time, because that's just how that works. But no, I want to tell you something. We were curious prior to this game. Okay, Manny Diaz, he backed off of Kevin Jennings against SMU and gave him problems, right? Because Manny Diaz is usually a high blitzer, right? And we're going, okay, he's going to turn on the gas. He's going to turn the heat back up, and he's going to blitz Cam Ward, and that's how the zone blitzes and stuff have to give him problems. He actually blitzed Ward less than he blitzed Jennings last week. Duke only blitzed 22.7% of the time. Ward was only pressured on 25% of his dropbacks. When he was under pressure, he struggled to a 31.4 passing grade. But Cam Ward, you can't just leave him back there with all this time like this. In Miami, to their credit, they had their highest pass blocking grade against a Power 5 opponent this season. But I was just surprised to see that Manny Diaz decided, okay, we're gonna sit back like we did last week. And I was like, you can't right now. I think it's a very hard sell unless you got absolute freaks up front. If you got a South Carolina, Ohio State type of defensive line to send only 4 at Cam Ward, because he's just going to sit back there calm and cool and hanging out. I mean, again, a 91.4 passing grade in a clean pocket, and he had a ton of clean pockets. And this is a really good Duke secondary. They can cover. But if you're not getting to Cam Ward, it doesn't matter. I'll tell you what. I'll say a thing right now. Is there a better? Well, maybe there's one. How many better wide receiver quarterback combinations are there than Ward and Restrepo? Maybe one.
Is it Shedeur and Travis?
That's probably the only one. Now that I thought about it out loud, I was
always,
like,
every time you say something like Cam Ward's like, oh, Shedeur's awesome.
Oh yeah, it's Shedeur and Travis, right? But no, I mean either way, those are the two right now, and fittingly, that's all the Heisman talk is centered around those two pairings, really. But I mean, I just was surprised to see Manny Diaz sit back the same way that he did last week, actually to an even greater extent, as opposed to coming after Cam with all the stuff that it usually comes after quarterbacks with.
Absolutely, yeah. And going into that, Cam Ward in the second half averaged 15.4 yards per pass, dude. What the hell? That is insane. 15 yards per pass in the second half. He averaged 6 yards per pass in the first half, 5.8 to exactly, with a 63.2 passing grade. 88 passing grade in the second half, 13 for 17, 262 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception in the second half, 3 big-time throws, 2 turnover-worthy plays, 88.2% adjusted completion rate as well. It looked like in the third quarter, Duke had a chance to upset Miami. And Dalton, since we were on the field for the Penn State game and Ohio State game, we couldn't really see what was going on. So after the game was over, we were like walking through trying to find our car, and like we're like trying to find people like, did Duke win? Like, what happened? And then finally we got to our car and realized that Miami ended up killing them.
Well, and then it was like, if once we couldn't see it anymore because there's no service up there at Penn State.
Yeah,
you're like, wait, Miami went and outscored them 36-3 after the last. Okay,
like
I guess
we lost service because we were in the press box and we went down. We lost service knowing Duke was up by 11. And then we got to the car and saw Miami won by 22. And we're like, what happened in the second half? And Cam Ward happened.
As he happens in the second half of basically every game now. This is just what it is. It's just tune in for Cam Ward in the second half because, I mean, it's just silly what he's doing at the end of these games.
He scoffs at double-digit leads for the opposing team.
Oh, yeah.
He scoffs at it. Yeah, okay, go ahead. Yeah, we'll see what happens there. So he's done it time and time again now, man. He's so calm and collected. His poise. I think that is, in his scouting report when we talk about for the draft, his number one strength is his poise. His poise is unbelievable, man. He's got the best poise in the country, I would say, probably. I think he's the best quarterback in America right now. I know you probably argue with Shedeur, but if the Heisman's going to go to a quarterback, which I still don't think it should, but Cam Ward definitely.
I agree with that. I'd probably still lean Shedeur as far as the draft goes, but Ward's tightening the gap. I mean, those are clearly the two guys that we're going to be talking about come that time.
He is just, he's so freaking good, man, and that's insane. And like I said, like, I wasn't really impressed by Manny Diaz's strategy in this one because we said, hey, speed him up and send blitzes at him, and you have the secondary that can hold up when you send a blitz, and he just didn't do it. And that's not the way you play against Cam Ward. You want to speed him up, and they didn't do it in this one.
Or maybe they don't because you've got a guy in the slot who's a freak of nature. I honestly think you talk about the draft stuff. He's got to be in the top 50 or 60 picks. Is Xavier Restrepo. Eight catches, 146 more yards, 3 touchdowns, broke Miami's career receiving record previously held by Santana Moss. I mean, just does everything. It screens, It's hot routes. It's improvising. Like that touchdown in the first half was just, as much as Cam gets credit for the throw, obviously, Restrepo taking 10 seconds to improvise and just find somewhere to get to in the end zone to get himself open. Again, I say it all the time. I think he's got the highest football IQ of any receiver in the country.
I would agree.
Really, just amazing. This is a guy, the combine is not going to do justice to how good a football player he is. He's probably going to go and run like a 4.5, and it's not going to be like some elite freak, but this is just a great football player. Restrepo, I mean, he proved it last year, right? Now this year, it's ridiculous. He's one of the 5 best receivers in the country this season. He's probably the best pure slot receiver in the country. He just needs to keep getting the credit every single week because he's just incredible. For as many weapons as Miami has, Xavier Restrepo is the guy in the slot, and the chemistry these two have, with it being only their first year playing together, it's ridiculous. It's the biggest reason award in Restrepo that these two guys, that they're going to probably make and possibly win the ACC title game. I mean, it's just ridiculous what the two of them are doing.
He's going to be severely underdrafted, I can tell you right now. Someone's going to get a steal on day 2 or wherever he goes, honestly, because I agree, maybe the combine numbers will be outrageous, but he is just an outrageously good football player, and he showed it again in this game. He's been one of the most reliable parts by them all year. I'll go to the other receiver on the other side. Samir Hagans, I talked about, is the highest grade player for Duke. I mean, he was one of the biggest reasons why Duke stayed in this game for so long. He caught 9 of his 12 targets for $139 and a touchdown, 4.96 yards per route run. He was targeted on nearly 43% of his routes. And really the most impressive part too, this is not the guy you're worried about with Duke's passing game. Like, he's the number 3 receiver mostly for Duke this year, but he was the one giving Miami the most problems in this one. So for the guy that usually is the tertiary option for the Blue Devils, Samir Hagans was the top guy for Duke in this one, and did a really good job against Miami's defense.
Yeah, no, sure did. But I mean, it was, even with as good a day as that, it's hard to overcome what Miami's got going on right now. So I think we're gonna have a lot of fun down the stretch here. I think Miami and SMU are obviously, they're gonna be the focus of the ACC the rest of the way.
All right, so that wraps up all of our reviews that we're doing. We still have to go over our standouts of the week, and of course, go over the brand new college football playoff bracket that going into week 11, at least what our eyes what it should be. But first, before we do that, I'm going to talk about our sponsor. That is Fabric by Gerber Life. Picture a future where your child has the financial freedom to pursue their dreams without any barriers. With a UGMA account from Fabric by Gerber Life, it's a real possibility because of the simple but impactful actions you can take today. Fabric by Gerber Life was designed by parents for parents to make it easy to plan for and manage your family's financial path. With a UGMA account from Fabric, you can start investing in your child's future today. Plus, you can share your child's unique gifting link with family and friends. So instead of giving toys they might outgrow for birthdays and special occasions, they can help outgrow your child's investments instead. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to protect their family. Start investing in your child today at fabric.com/PFFNFL. That's meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. Portfolios managed by Fort Washington Investment Advisors Incorporated. Additional services provided by Apex Clearing Corporation. All investing is subject to risk. Monthly minimum contribution required. Learn more at meetfabric.com. Don't, I'm horrible at managing my money, and MeetFabric's helped me a lot, honestly. So this is a service that you should definitely use because I'm not very good at investing. My FanDuel account will tell you that exactly. MeetFabric.com has done a great job of just keeping me under control a little bit.
Yeah, but it's something anybody can learn, and that's okay. That's why they're there to help.
That's why they're there to help. Yeah, I can't pick any upsets to save my life, apparently, so that's been killing my bank account. But otherwise, MeetFabric's
you just got to pick Vandy.
MeetFabric's keep me afloat right now. We'll say that. So let's go over to our standouts of the week. So outside of these 8 games that we talked about, who were some of the 3 players that really stood out to you? Start off with your first player, Dalton.
Okay, all right. We'll get through this quick so we can get to the playoff
Yes.
picture. That's the fun part. But first, Cam Scatterbo went and had a monster game against Oklahoma State. How about 23 carries for $151 on the ground, 4 catches for 121 through the air, 3 total touchdowns, 10 forced missed tackles, 87.3 overall grade, and Arizona State is bowl eligible. After, obvious some struggles the last couple of years that they've had. They are 6-2. They're bowl eligible. Cam Scatterbo, star running back. We've seen it so many times. Monster game against Oklahoma State. He gets the first one because when I was rolling through some box scores and saw his numbers, I was like, well, that's one of the three. That just has to be, because I mean, when I tell you he refused, he does it every week, but he refused to be tackled by Oklahoma State. Yes, it's just nuts.
Yeah, and there's a couple guys that I saw in the box score. I was like, yeah, I got to talk about them. Jackson Dart was one of them. 93.9 passing grade against Arkansas in a 63-31 victory, 25 for 31 for 515 yards and 6 touchdowns, 4 big-time throws, 0 turnover-worthy plays, 89.3% adjusted completion rate, a 156.3 passer rating is nearly perfect. Perfect passer rating is 158.3. Dalton, his last pass attempt came with 10 minutes left to go in the fourth quarter. He had 500 yards by the fourth quarter, pretty much. It was really, really impressive. And this is really the Ole Miss offense that we thought we'd see all year. This is what we thought we'd see. And now it's good for Jackson Dart to be this red hot going into next week in a must-win game against Georgia to keep their playoff hopes alive. It's good now that your star quarterback is coming off maybe a career best performance.
Yeah, he sure is. Was it a school record, that 515? I think I heard it.
Probably was, yeah.
Yeah, and Jordan Watkins too out at receiver, just doing crazy stuff on the outside. Yeah, no, that Jackson Dart made me look really good picking Arkansas to win that game. I picked the wrong SEC upset, and I'm really annoyed about it.
Yeah.
All right, second guy. I'm gonna go a little bit of redemption here. Okay, we haven't talked about Oregon, Michigan yet, and kind of a story that comes out of that game is Tej Johnson coming out of the game, had his arm in a sling on the sideline, and Oregon needed somebody else to step up at receiver, and actually it wasn't Evan Stewart. I believe he only had 16 yards. Got kind of the return of Trayshawn Holden here, okay? We saw he got himself ejected against Ohio State, kind of in the doghouse lately, wasn't playing as much the last couple weeks, but he comes in, gets 6 catches for 149 yards, a little bit of a redemption game for him against Michigan. I think if Johnson is hurt, if he's supposed to miss time here, Holden's going to play a big role in Oregon's success. He did that yesterday against Michigan, so I think he definitely deserves some credit for coming back. Obviously, some self-created adversity there with what happened in the Ohio State game, but he's really talented, and we've seen a couple of times this year when he's involved in their offense, they get even more dangerous. So I just want to credit Trayshawn Holden for kind of battling through that stuff, and when he had an opportunity to kind of rise back up here, he did it. 149 yards against, obviously, a really good Michigan defense.
Yeah, I want to shout out to Evan Stewart, too, because he obviously was a very quiet day, but he actually had a one-handed touchdown grab.
Oh,
that
yeah.
was called back. Disgusting grab.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I think it was like an ineligible man downfield Oregon got called for, but it was a disgusting touchdown catch. Unfortunately, for him to get called back, I want to shout that out, though, because it was a really amazing catch. So go check it out if you haven't seen it already. But Amarian Hampton's my second standout, the running back from North Carolina. 32 carries for 176 yards and 4 touchdowns against Florida State. 126 yards after contact, 3.9 yards after contact per attempt. Also, 3 catches for 93 yards and a touchdown against Florida State. 269 total yards, 5 total touchdowns for Amarian Hampton. If you look up bell cow in a dictionary, it's a picture of Amarian Hampton, man.
Yeah.
This is the offense for North Carolina right now. They have no passing game right now, obviously on a backup quarterback. Amarian Hampton is the entire offense. We thought it would be that case going into the year, and then after Max Johnson got hurt, it's like, okay, no, he is the entire offense, and he's just carrying the Tar Heels, and the fact that he had 270 yards and 5 touchdowns against Florida State, that's a standout performance and deserves to be shouted out.
They get more mileage out of him than an 18-wheeler. It's just, I mean, I would, again, we've talked about that, and we'll see how much tread is left on the tires when he gets drafted, but, I mean, still through all North Carolina's difficulties, what a year he's having. All right, let me go to Washington and USC. This kind of a thriller. Went down to the end, as it is with USC every week, and they've lost, I think it's 5 straight one-score games, which is tough for them. Washington pulled one out against them, but best player on the field for the Huskies was Carson Bruner at linebacker. 86.6 overall grade, 5 defensive stops, 2 interceptions, another pass breakup, a batted pass at the line of scrimmage, 2 pressures as a pass rusher. Carson Bruner, their middle linebacker, just stuffing the stat sheet. Credit to Washington staying in this thing, trying to stay bowl eligible and beating USC in another tight game. Also had a huge tackle on a goal line stand in the fourth quarter against the Trojans that would have given USC the lead. Kind of where USC is at right now, but Carson Bruner was really good for Washington. Their defense held it together. Jed Fish has that team at least playing fundamentally sound, tough football, even if they don't win every week. And I'll tell you what, maybe they give Nittany Lions some problems next week. We'll see where that goes. But especially if Bruner's going to play like that and stop the running the way he did yesterday, that could be a closer game. Jed Fish knows how to keep those kinds of games close.
And how dejected Penn State looked after that game as well. They better get it ready.
Better get it back.
Although
I'll tell you this, Washington, they're tough and they're prepared every week.
And I will say that's a whiteout.
Yeah.
Penn State is a whiteout. That's the thing. I'm like, all right, you know what? That is the ultimate equalizer right there. Is the whiteout crowd
and a cross country trip on top. A
cross country trip and a night game too, of course. So yeah, that's gonna be a great one. I think we might preview that game. We'll talk about it after this. But my last one I want to talk about is Mike Green, the edge defender from Marshall. 90+ pass rush grade, 90+ run defense grade against Louisiana Monroe this past week. He had 2 sacks and 4 pressures on only 15 pass rushing snaps. It was crazy what Mike Green was doing against Louisiana Monroe. Also on run D, 5 run D stops and 2 tackles for loss or no gain. This is right now the second straight year that he has a 90+ PFF grade. He is one of the most underrated players in college football. I know Connor Rogers loves him for the NFL draft. And Dalton, I think he's a big time sleeper for the NFL draft as well. I think right now you look at the consensus board, he's like a day 3 pick or something like that. He is a really good football player. And because he plays at Marshall, not a lot of people talk about him, but he has been dominating for 2 years in a row now, and I think he's a big-time sleeper for the NFL draft.
And this is now as the guy, because you remember last year they had Elijah Alston also,
right.
And he transferred to Miami and Green State. So, I mean, no, it's really impressive. He's been consistently, over the last 2 years, one of the best defensive players in college football.
Absolutely. So, Dawn, before we go, we have to talk about the updated playoff picture. So, we're not doing a top 25 this week. If you want to find the PFF top 25, it'll come out tomorrow morning on PFF.com. So go check that out if you want to see the full top 25. What we want to do now, though, is because now on Tuesday night, the College Football Playoff Committee will be revealing their rankings for the first time this season. So we thought this would be the perfect time to switch over from doing a regular top 25 to doing what the bracketology would look like right now after 10 weeks of the college football season. So let's go over the first 4 teams that have buys, and that is Oregon at number 1, Georgia at number 2, Miami at number 3, and BYU at number 4. For anyone who's wondering, why is Ohio State not in the top 4? What does that mean? It's just that the 4 highest ranked conference champions get a bye. So obviously with the Power 4, most likely it's going to be whoever wins the Power 4 conferences. So those are the 4 highest ranked teams, obviously from each conference, the SEC, the Big 10, the Big 12, and ACC. That's the 4 teams that get a bye. So it's not necessarily like the playoff anymore. It's just rank the teams no matter what. It depends on conferences now as well. Let's go over to the matchups that we'll see there as well. Number 5, Ohio State will be playing number 12, Boise State for us right now. Number 6, Texas against number 11, Alabama. Number 7, Penn State against number 10, Notre Dame. And number 8, Indiana at number 9, Tennessee. And keep in mind, the higher-ranked team will be hosting that first-round playoff game as well. And Boise State, while maybe not is going to be a top 12 team in the PFF top 25, again, I want to remind people that there are the 5 highest-ranked conference champions get into the field, which means the top group of 5 champion will be getting in, and right now that would be Boise State as well. So that's why Boise State gets into the playoff. But Dawn, well, actually before we do that, let's go to the first 4 out as well. The first 4 teams that just missed out on being in this mix: SMU, Texas A&M, LSU, and Ole Miss were the first 4 teams that just missed out on being a part of bracketology. And obviously a very long way to go the rest of the year, but those are the teams that are right outside the mix right now. What stands out to you, though, in what would the playoff look like right now going into week 11?
I think especially with the Texas A&M loss last night, we'll start in the top 4. Yeah, I think Georgia. It's funny because of the 4 conferences. Let me start here. The SEC actually has the least clarity.
Yeah,
we have no idea, especially until next week when we get Bama and LSU playing, Georgia and Ole Miss playing. That now A&M's got to play Texas, and we have zero clarity in the SEC at all. I think the other 3, Oregon, they're pretty much a shoo-in to make the Big Ten title game. Miami's getting there with the ACC title game. BYU has a very good inside track with the rest of their schedule. But the SEC, I mean, Georgia's there. That could change week to week. I think we have no idea what's going to happen because every single team, I think, is a little bit more flawed than we thought they were, right? I mean, especially maybe Ole Miss is now getting hot enough to go and overtake it, or maybe the winner of LSU-Bama springboards themselves into that spot. I think the SEC right now is the most wide-ranging, maybe even fascinating race when you have all of this. I think it starts in the first 4, and I think it's incredibly murky. I think the other conferences, we're going, okay, in the Big Ten, there's 3 or 4. In the ACC, we've already almost narrowed it down to the 2, as long as they don't lose the rest of the way. BYU, we like the inside track, and we know the other 3 fighting for it. The SEC, that's a mess.
Yeah,
that's an absolute mess in the SEC right now, especially at the top with all the upsets we've seen and everything we've seen. There's some good teams even in the middle, right? We talk about South Carolina and Vandy and Kentucky a lot because these are teams that can give. They have pulled these upsets. They can give these other teams problems. So I'm curious to see where that all gets handled with the SEC through the whole whole process, but it starts right at the top. It's Georgia for the moment. It could be anybody else next week.
I feel solid about Georgia being the top-ranked SEC team right now, but like I said, Texas is still up there. You still got Tennessee, you still got Alabama, and obviously the first four out, three of them are SEC teams, right? You got A&M, LSU, Ole Miss. I mean, it's still wide open in that conference right now. I mean, there's some great matchups, Dalton, that we got.
Oh, you know Quinn Ewers wants that again.
Oh, yeah, Texas, Alabama.
You already know he wants Bama again. If there's any playoff game that Quinn Ewers is going to go and play the best game of his career, it'll be against Alabama because that's what he does.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That would be hilarious, actually. I did not even think about that. That'd be really funny. I mean,
the other interesting one here for me, we were talking about this a little bit yesterday, is Indiana. Mm-hmm. And Indiana right now is sitting there at number 8. There is a world, okay? Can I throw you the craziest, bizarro world that we have here with Indiana? There is a world that we get to Selection Sunday, right? And Indiana's the number 1 team in the country.
Yep.
They've got Michigan next week, big game. Got Ohio State coming. Purdue, they shouldn't lose to Purdue. And then if they beat Ohio State and they run the table 12-0, they're going to be playing Oregon in the Big Ten title game. And at that point, after beating Ohio State, they might be like number 2 or 3 in the country. And if they beat Oregon, they're probably going to be number 1. There is a world. We're 4 games away.
They will be number 1.
There's a real world where Indiana walks into the playoff as the number 1 team in the country. It's entirely possible. I think if they lose to Ohio State, then we have a different case of like 11-1. I still think they should get in at that point.
Probably,
they've dominated anybody else. But there is an actual world here where they are like number 2 or 3 going into the Big Ten title game if they get there, if they beat Ohio State. And then if they beat Oregon, they'd be the number 1 team in the country.
The only thing that scares me, and I agree, they probably should still get an 11-1. And I know they dominate every game, but if they lose to Ohio State, especially if it's convincingly, then it's like, okay, who would they beat? Then the argument is like, oh, who are they beating? I still think they get in over some 10-2 teams, but that's the problem is that you start to run into, okay, their wins
But they've won, what is it? Every game. The closest one was Washington by 17.
Yeah.
And yesterday they're down 10-0 and they score 47 unanswered.
That's the argument is that they've blown out everyone.
You're blowing out and I don't see many scenarios where Ohio State just goes and dog walks them. I don't see that at all. I think Indiana has a legitimate shot to go in there and win that game, especially what we've seen from Ohio State the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's going to be an insane race, man. I mean, just Oregon, Georgia, Miami, BYU is the first 4 buys. It's just insane. It's just insane what we have in college football right now. And then look at those matchups, man. Penn State, Notre Dame, that's a great historic matchup with those 2 programs right there. Ohio State, Boise State with Ashton Ginty going up against the Buckeyes would be really fun as well. That Indiana-Tennessee game, I mean, Eli would probably be really nervous about that game going into it.
Oh, it should be.
Yeah,
that's real. I'm going to tell you, of all the surprise teams that we've seen so far, we've seen Pitt, we've seen Arizona State, we've seen Iowa, we've seen some other. I think the 2 that are in this, BYU and Indiana, are the 2 most real ones. This is not fairy tale. This is not fluke. These are 2 really good football teams that are going to stay, at the very least, deep in this mix the rest of the way.
And this Tennessee offense is not really executing all that well, and the Indiana offense is executing really well.
Oh, right this minute, I would pick Indiana to win.
Yeah, that's a really, really fun game. Dalton.
Sorry, Eli.
So those are the games, just to remind people, this is what it should be right now. Obviously, a lot can change. Is there anything that, like, jumping out to you, like any team that's not in that top 12 that you think, okay, at the end of the year, they will be in there?
I found it interesting, that debate between SMU and Alabama there at 11. Because SMU with the 1 loss only to BYU, Alabama lost to Vandy.
Bama beat Georgia.
They did. It's the tweener of what is it your record? Is it your losses? Is it what is? I think SMU's still some work to do here.
Bama beat Georgia and South Carolina, who South Carolina's going to be ranked now probably.
Getting such a big win last night, though, for SMU in such convincing fashion. I think that's going to be that weird cross-conference case of how do we measure these things? Is 10-2 SEC better than 11-1 or 11-2 ACC? We're going to there's going to be a lot of strength of schedule and sort of arguments like that. SMU is the team that jumps out to me there.
Okay, yeah, I agree. I think SMU has definitely a great shot at making it, but I just right now just looking at Alabama, what they've done, like killing Missouri, who's still a top 25 team. Lost to Tennessee, who's a top 10 team right now. Lost to Vanderbilt, who's an argument to be a top 25 team. They beat South Carolina, who's a top 25 team, and obviously beating Georgia, who's the number 2 team in the country. That's a big one as well. So I think that ultimately was the reason why, but it's close. It definitely was close for the 2. I agree. SMU is definitely up there. And obviously, anything in the SEC could happen as well. I mean, LSU still is going to.
And you got 2 teams sitting right there with LSU and Ole Miss, and then obviously with Bama and Georgia in it. I mean, those are. What kind of – is there more of a definition of a must-win game than what those 2 have next week?
Yeah, and then I mean, Iowa State, Kansas State, Colorado. Look, if they beat BYU, like they're obviously in it, and they're a top 4 seed as well, most likely, at least if Boise State doesn't jump them and get into the top 4 as well. And then, I mean, Army is still in the mix for the group of 5 race. Like, it is still a wide open race.
I counted like 2 weeks ago, I had it at like 38 or 39 teams alive when I was doing it on a board at home, and I think I'm down to about 26 or 27.
I think I might start doing an article every week of just who's alive right now
we might have
in
to
the
do
playoff
that.
race.
Yeah.
That'd be really fun. But yeah, so we got through the playoff race. Dalton, before we leave, you want to go over a few of the games. I don't think these are all of the games that we're going to talk about. We're probably deciding the other ones. But these ones we are like, okay, these ones we are absolutely talking about.
We're gonna add a couple more, but the 5 that we know 100% we're doing right now, we've got Alabama LSU night game at Death Valley.
Playoff game.
Pretty much a playoff game, right? Second big game in the SEC, Georgia and Ole Miss. And Ole Miss, honestly, probably has their season on the line in that game, even though they've been getting hot now. Now it's a thing. Got the Holy War. We got BYU going down to Salt Lake City to play Utah. BYU's raging hot. Utah's been struggling, but you know what? You get a rivalry like that, you never know what happens. Colorado going down to Texas Tech for what honestly might be their toughest test left this season.
Yeah.
If they get by Texas Tech, we could be talking about 10-2, and then I would call it, and we're going to be there, the biggest game in the history of the Indiana Hoosiers against Michigan at home. I think this game very well could be the difference between going to the playoff and not. It's going to be rocking in Bloomington. We're going to be there, and I'll tell you what, Michigan's still some things that could give you problems, right? Mason Graham and those guys on the inside, but Indiana's rolling. But I would call these next 2 games for Indiana, they're the 2 biggest games in school history, and it's going to be they very well could be the difference between playoffs and not for them.
Did you see that Indiana has already tied their most wins in a season in program history? They're 9-0. They've never won 10 games in a season before, and they're 9-0 right now. So they've already tied what they've the best season they've ever had. Honestly, it's just amazing what the cursing that he's done in their first year at that program. So yeah, those are the 5 right now. Again, we might add 1 or 2 more as well to get to 6 or 7, but those are the 5 that we're absolutely doing right now. If you want to see any other games, obviously shout us out in the comments, because maybe we'll look at those comments and add those games as well, because we are still determining what the other games will be for our Week 11 preview, which will be on Tuesday night at 6 p.m. Make sure you guys stay tuned for our Week 11 preview. Thanks for watching this Week 10 review show. Shout out to Brewster Ty, Brewster Eli back there, Dalton Wasserman. I'm Max Chadwick. We'll see you guys on Tuesday night for our Week 11 preview show.